Well, hello, everybody. We're live. Happy Monday. It's really nice to be with you again today. We have a really good show for you. In today's live stream episode, along with Dr. Billinghurst and me, we have Joel from Steve's Real Food. So we're really excited because Steve's Real Food has been around a while and they have a really great product we want to share with you and tell you a bit more about them as a company and what they're doing in the raw food movement. So first and foremost, I want to bring on my second musketeer, my co-host, and one of the best vets, and also let's not forget the father of raw food, Dr. Ian Billinghurst.
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning.
Well, it's probably not. Well, it's morning and evening and afternoon and everything else somewhere on this planet.
It is. It's 7 a.m. for you because you're over by Sydney, Australia, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yep. And for us in Colorado, it's 3 o'clock. But they say somewhere it's the morning and somewhere it's the evening, right?
Well, for you, it's almost wine o'clock.
No, it's 3.
Not wine o'clock yet?
No, it's 3 p.m.
Oh, yeah, that's wine o'clock.
Oh, wine o'clock. I thought you said wine. Right.
Oh, Rob.
Yeah, maybe after this, but possibly.
I thought you'd had a coffee.
Yeah, right. I definitely can't have wine before this. But hey, let's bring on our esteemed guest. So Joel is a fellow raw foodie himself. His own pets, have brought him to this cause. He's very experienced and he's been doing it about as long as I have, a little over 20 years, which is still less than Ian, but it's quite good. And he's the vice president of Steve's Real Food. So welcome, Joel.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. It is 4 o'clock where I am in Minnesota. So
good morning or good afternoon, Joel.
And surprisingly warm weather finally. We may have spring, so it's a very exciting time for us here.
Right on. It is exciting when you move into spring. It's real spring. It's very nice. I feel the same way here.
Well, we're in autumn and it's raining, and it's been raining for the last 4 months where I am. And it's on the south coast of New South Wales, Australia, and we have had a lot of rain, which is wonderful for farmers, but a little bit too much. But hey, we just have to roll with whatever we are delivered, I believe.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? Well, yeah. Joel, listen, we're so happy to have you, and I'm a big fan, and that's why I reached out. I think Steve's is a great company, and I know you guys are really working on all fronts. You're quite the modern company. I mean, I see that you're very interested in your B Corp status, and I know how difficult that is to get, and sustainability. So why don't we kick the conversation off talking about sustainability and how Steve's is looking at sustainability, in your company.
And that's actually a really good spot to kick off because it's one of our core values. And it can be trendy, I think, for companies to get on board with the environment and do things like that. But this is truly a lifestyle. It matters to the owner of our company, Nicole Lindsley. It's something that she believes strongly in. And so we're always looking for ways to better Steve's for that journey, for that conclusion of being awesome to the environment. So we do things, we're always on the hunt for better packaging. Better in the production side of making the packaging, better for how you recycle or maybe even biodegradable one day. We're looking for things like that we can do our part. Our plant is headquartered in Oregon, and it's a great location. Wind and water powered plant, 70% of it. We're using the environment to power our plant. It's excellent. And we meet the farmers. We're very transparent with our sourcing for our products. I think that's super important. You can actually go to our website and spot, the names of these farmers. And, to be able to do that matters to us. And, there is no best raw food brand out there. We're all excellent. We're all trying to be that top rung of the ladder. And I don't look at us as competing with each other, but Steve's is the best for me. It's best for our team because that sustainability matches our belief system.
I think that's fabulous, Joel. That each of you, as long as each of you believes you are the best, then you are going to continue to be the best from your perspective and for your customers. And that's what I wanted so many years ago, that we should start well, I was hoping to bring a lot of the big pet food manufacturers online, and maybe we will, and maybe we won't, maybe we have to some degree. But to watch as all these raw food companies spring up and do their utmost to make healthy pets, that is that was my goal. That's what I wanted to see happen. And I'm seeing it in my lifetime, which is great. And against, I guess, the opposition to a large degree of the veterinary profession, which is really sad, but at least it's happening.
And we at Steve's, we don't even consider other raw brands competition, because if there was only one raw brand, it would stay a niche in a pet retailer. We want them all to succeed, and we'd like kibble to end up being the niche. So we want a whole row of freezers, surrounding that pet store as the thing to buy. So it is important that we all succeed. I also have to warn you, if my camera starts shaking, it's because my cat has joined the desk here and wants to be a part of the webinar or the presentation here. So yes, anytime my camera shakes, that's what's going on.
Well, your cat has this crazy playground in the background.
What do you think of that? You think we spoil her? There's a reason we call her Queen Freya. Yep, she rules our kingdom. There's no doubt about that.
Queen Freya. That's
typical
great.
of all cats. The same with ours.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, you thank you. You brought up packaging. That's a really difficult. Most people don't realize, unless you actually get into the details of packaging. It's obviously you have costs and stuff to consider, but the permeability of packaging that might be compostable, let's say, or how long it lasts. There's lots of drawbacks to it once you get really deep into the specs. And then you also have to consider, if you're passing on these costs to the consumer, how adoptable is it going to be? So for example, like compostable, not every municipality, every city, every town has composting abilities, right? So here you are, you're making a decision or you're at least thinking about, if you're thinking about compostable, you're thinking about, well, gee, am I going to pass this on to 100% of my customers when maybe a small percentage of those customers will be able to use it? Otherwise, it just goes into the trash just the same. And frankly, having compostable packaging in the landfill is a little bit better than regular packaging. It's not a whole heck of a lot. So you're making these, calculations on, am I reusing past waste, which is a really great, reusing, repurposing past plastics and that sort of thing, recycling. You're making a lot of calls for all of your consumers. We really, it's a big conversation I think we have to get at least a country and the planet on this post consumer waste conversation.
And there are things that you have to compromise because of that cost if you end up exceeding the market, what people are willing to pay. And then in addition to that, you have the physical challenges. Not every packaging can sustain being frozen.
Yeah.
Just the simple logistics of it. They crack, they tear. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. For those listening, just know we're on it. Like, it matters to us, and we're going to get better every year. And that's really what we try to do, is make these incremental steps, toward excellence.
Yeah, that's what we did too. We came out with right away with a sample package, and frankly, we found a better way, and it was using much better low impact product, using things that could be recycled, or frankly, most of our sampling is compostable. So, and we had to just toss out the last package and did the idea for it. Luckily we stopped right in time. We didn't have to actually produce it. We got our money back. But we, it's just being clever in these little ways and these little, thinking about how you can also reduce the weight and the shipping costs for the consumer, and also the impact of shipping each of the products. How you can that's a huge impact on the environment. The planes it travels on, and all the vehicle traffic, et cetera. So lots to think about. So tell me, you guys are all working on your B Corp status, which is super impressive. So tell us a little bit about where you are with that.
I might not be the best person to ask that to. As far as the details, what I know in my role is it's a year-long process. Like that's, I mean, if you were to put a timeline on it, and it's a very in-depth process.
Yeah.
So they don't just hand that out, and it's good because it is something that is earned, and that's really the most important thing. Is it makes you very good by the time you achieve that status. And so
Can I
really that's what we're looking to do. We do things just in our the way our company functions too. Our sales team, we work remote. We do a lot of Zoom calls with customers. We do a lot of interaction like that. We're not traveling as much. You may not get the face-to-face time, but we're saving a lot of that cost, but we're also saving the fuel, the time, the energy, everything that goes into that. So we look at every aspect of our impact on the environment, on the planet, and are we doing our best? Mhm.
Great.
I was going to ask what in Australia, I'm not aware of this particular, only was made aware of B Corp this morning by Rob. Is this an environmental impact, or is there more to it? Can you tell me about that, Joel?
It is primarily a sustainability, environmental impact, kind of throughout. So that would be the most impact that it has
That's
is
fabulous because,
environment,
that
impact on our sourcing, the farmers, being in community farmers, all of those little touches too. It's not as simple as just having recycled packaging. There's a lot of depth to it.
absolutely. When I first started looking at this whole issue years ago, I was part of a group of people that were trying to live locally and live sustainably. And it really bothered me, and it has bothered me over the years, that um, these companies are producing or using packaging that is either non-recyclable or not compostable, and it just stays in the environment forever, and the energy involved in transporting these products. So I think it's great because I understand, I understand the immense problems that are associated with all these things, particularly with frozen food, which is so heavy and so on. So that getting to freeze dried again is another part of that, which is absolutely brilliant. So anything we can do to reduce that impact, I think, is wonderful. And it just pleases me that companies like your own are now heading in that direction. That is absolutely wonderful that we can reduce that impact and at the same time make our pets healthy. And of course, always that hidden agenda that as people watch their pets get healthy on real food, they think about themselves and the way they eat and the way they live, which is fabulous.
I do agree with that. It's interesting because you mentioned more and more companies. We do an allergy webinar, a spring webinar, and in there I talk about more and more companies are getting on board with pet safe products, and some companies are actually dumping their entire lineup to be non-toxic, chemical-free, pet safe, and that's awesome. I'm like, we have an opportunity. In my opinion, right now is by far the best time to be a pet parent because we can do things like we're doing. We're talking, coming from different places. We can reach people and we have way more knowledge. The challenge is sifting through that sea of information that's online and breaking it down so that consumers can take that first step and then that next step. But it's a great time to be a pet parent. And I grew up in the 80s. Nobody had a cat wall like the wall behind me on their wall in the 80s. And now it's seen as cool. It ain't weird. It's cool. And so that's a different mindset that people have. Dogs and cats are family members. We talk about them as if they are children. So much different energy that's out there.
And of course, your cat wall is actually trying to emulate an aspect of the natural environment. And so we're looking here to evolution, really. And that's always the key to everything that we do. Why did we or our animals evolve this way? And how can we make that fit into our lives today so that we fulfill that need within them?
That's great. So what kind of person, tell me the type of customer that comes to you? Like where are they? Are they new raw foodies? Are they, do they fit a general demographic? Is there anything you can tell us about them?
We get a lot of customers. It's hard to say, all of them. But I would say if I were to put a type on our most common customer today, it's my dog has itchy ears. My dog is scratching all the time. I've tried different things. I'm at my wit's end. And then they might add, I've heard about raw. Or they stop there. And it's like, because people are ailment driven. They don't go into a store asking for raw. They go in saying, my dog has itchy ears. Do you have ear cleaner? Well, they actually just asked for raw. And so that's what we do. If we talk about our core values, the second biggest core value beyond the sustainability is education. We believe the biggest barrier in people having their four-legged kids thrive is education. Just knowing what to do with all these awesome products out there and how they work and when, and knowing that they're ailment driven. So we try to teach retail staff as often as we can to listen to those questions and don't expect them to say, point me to the freezer, where's the raw? They're going to say, my bully breed, it seems to have all these red spots on their belly. What's going on? My Bashan, my Lhasa Apso, chronic ear infections. Every 90 days, I need ear cleaner, and then they need antibiotics. Well, they're asking for raw. They just don't know it. And so that, to me, is the number one thing is people speak in ailment. And so teaching to hear those ailments from retail staff is a big part of our education process. And then also remembering that, I was a guy that did not know anything about raw 20 years ago, making sure we're talking to first-time raw feeders or kibble feeders that don't understand raw. And, I'm using the word raw a lot here. We actually like saying whole living food because raw even has a little edge to it. And really what we're talking about is whole living food, whether that's in form of freeze-dried or goat milk or, all these ways to add life to that cooked, sterile kibble. To me, that's a great thing. And we're okay if people feed kibble and raw. We want them to take that first step. And then once they see results, they might take the next step all on their own. They don't need convincing because the results are there.
Joel, I'm listening to your talk, and you're talking about education, and you're talking about disease, and you're talking about dealing with disease. And this should be the province of the veterinary profession, but it isn't. To what extent do you find you're able to educate, if at all, the veterinary profession, and how do you go about it? Do you have any success in that area? Because this is what we need to do. These are the people who should be educating the pet owners about healthy feeding, about raw.
So it's a much harder teach. We do lunch and earns where we open up our doors and I'll present to veterinarians, via Zoom, things like that. We don't have our schedule booked with them because it's an obstacle. And the good news is I'm Mr. Optimism, by the way. So there are more and more vets and a lot just like you that are out there that helping to spread the word, seeing enough success. I also think that things that happen in the people world really affect the pet world, just like the advent of processed foods. Well, then pet food slowly came after. As more and more people are eliminating starch from their diet, processed things, going back to whole foods, it's going to go in. The language is there now, because turmeric was something that was used in the people world long before it entered the pet world. Well, those people now know what that word means. Same with probiotics. Probiotics are everywhere right now because they work. Well, there's some that are good, some that are bad. There's different levels, but that started in the people world. Now it came into the pet world. And we're getting some great products like what you've got going on, Rob. That's awesome innovation. But that's because I think the people world kind of started that buzz. So I tend to like it when the pet world can take the good parts of people knowledge and then we follow in line. But back to the original question, it's an obstacle. It's difficult to do that. We don't have perfect answers on that. We reach out. My goal is to make veterinarians neutral, but I will say this: I am not a person who is in any kind of a conflict with a veterinarian that says raw is bad. In fact, I've had dialogue with, our own veterinarian who's, a couple veterinarians in the practice are holistic, couple are more standard. And I've had dialogue, and it opened up my eyes a little bit because we're using the word raw in general. And there are people that home prepare their food and it's an incomplete diet and there are bad results. Veterinarians see the sick animals. They don't see the success stories that we're presenting as much. We see the happy endings. They see the ones that have had damage because of a malnourished raw dog. So when we talk about raw food, I always say we got to add the word commercially prepared. There are good homemade recipes, but let's start with a commercially prepared raw. So even if people don't go on Steve's as their first raw, I want them to use a commercially prepared raw because a lot of time went into that formula to make it complete. And that way they at least can see what their dog is capable of before they try to just add raw food and mess it up. And that's where you see those bad stories. So I have some understanding of why veterinarians say, oh, I've seen, dogs that are terrible on raw. And you ask a little more, it's usually a homemade recipe that just, it's missing a lot of stuff. And so, we do all of our education is meant to be positive. And I like the whole living food aspect as opposed to raw. And we also talk about lightly processed because that is a language that veterinarians do understand. They understand the role of over processing and all the preservatives and things like that. Those are commonalities that we can all agree on. So we tend to start there.
So what does it mean to you guys at Steve's to be, minimally processed?
For us, the least amount of, I want to say like handling, not freezing, refreezing, shipping across the US, then having more process done, then forming patties, then shipping it back. So even things like our HPP process, we use a pasteurization process, a very low pressure, very, very limited handling of the product. We do it all right there at the plant in-house so that we don't have to ship it, have it reformed. If you've ever taken a hamburger patty and rolled it up in the palm of your hand over and over and over again, and then try to make a patty out of it, it doesn't work. Like even that much handling changes it. And so we want that whole living food. There's no way to avoid some processing because we're processing food. We're creating it, we're packaging it, we're making it commercially available. But the lack of adding heat and all of these other things to make it shelf stable, I mean, it's got to be frozen. That alone eliminates a lot of processing for us. The least amount of touches. It's amazing how much people screw up the more we touch things. There's a reason why the apple is in a single serving size. So, yeah, we want to keep hands off as much as we can. So,
least amount of human interference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Joel, you mentioned a moment ago that you want people to start with commercial food, but can you tell me from your experience and talking to people and to vets, what do you find is the biggest mistake made by beginning raw feeders who attempt to do it at home without a commercial product? Or what are the mistakes that you see most commonly?
They just add meat or
So,
just meat and bone. Just very simple. Or sometimes we find out, well, I've been feeding raw. I cooked chicken for my dog and added to the kibble. Well, it's not even raw anymore. Like there's these little things, and it's like the more you ask questions, it's like, all right, I see what we're saying here. It's that completion of it, making sure you really are having a complete diet. Um,
okay,
I just think people try to it looks, you look at our raw food, it looks like a hamburger patty. Well, there's a little more in there than just that.
of
So,
course, yes.
that's where I think a mistake is made.
So it
Um,
really is a lack of knowledge about,
yep.
I guess, the basis of raw, what it's raw. I think that's the problem. The word raw just implies a raw meat to many people.
Mhm.
And yes, a meat-only diet, which is an absolute disaster, always has been. But yeah, the other thing, which Rob and you both have touched upon now, is the microbiome and bacteria in food. Can you tell me? I know the federal law in America and in Australia, for that matter, worries about things like Salmonella, Campylobacter, E. coli, and so on. And I know you're undergoing high pressure pasteurization, but you're also trying to maintain the good bacteria in there.
Mhm.
From your understanding, what do you see as the benefits of good bacteria in the food that you produce?
The benefits of good bacteria
Yeah.
are everything. I mean, good health, the ability to thrive begins and ends in the gut. Our ability to digest food. Now, digestibility is one of those words that it's actually showing up on packaging in the pet world. It'll be like a starburst on a bag of food or a product, 95% digestible. Well, it sounds cool, but nobody knows what it means. And that's when you bite into an apple, that is your ability to grab every single piece of its power and deliver it exactly where it needs to go. Digestibility is very important. Our organ function, our immune system begins and ends in the gut. And really, the number one health issue out there that we see from our angle is yeast overgrowth, and that is all that high starched in there, chronic allergy symptoms that are not really allergies. When people think of yeast overgrowth, they think of yeasty ears and ear infections. It goes way worse than that, and it can lead to leaky gut and conditions like that. We think that if you want to have a healthy dog or a cat, it begins and ends in the gut. So we do add goat milk to our entire line. Goat milk naturally has a lot of beneficial bacteria. We do that on purpose. And this isn't a little drop to say, hey, we got goat milk in there. It is a meaningful amount for the sole purpose of giving awesome gut health. And if there was a place to start, somebody who just says, I cannot get my head around that hippie food you got there, that raw stuff. I get the whole living thing, but I can't even look at that and do it. We recommend goat milk. Add some non-pasteurized goat milk, and it goes a long ways because you're automatically adding that good whole living food in there, intracellular moisture, and you're balancing the gut. That simple thing alone. When I talk, I'm like, starch is a root of all evil, and starch feeds bad bacteria. So eliminate that and add good bacteria, and a whole lot of changes just from that occur.
Wow,
Yeah.
Joel. If I got to talk to a manufacturer of kibble, they would not talk like that. Isn't that wonderful to hear you say all that stuff, which is just so true? Um, I, that blows me away. Because from what I understand, that a lot of people actually get into raw food and manufacture it, some of them without a great deal of knowledge. And it's wonderful to hear that knowledge. coming out of a raw food producer, because that means your product is going to be a product full of integrity, full of actual food and the proper nutrient balance that real food delivers.
Well, and I agree with your comment. I'll say it another way. There's a Chinese proverb that says death begins in the gut. And I'll flip it and I'll say life begins in the gut, because it affects so many. I mean, we've all read this, that it affects so many parts of us. We're just starting to understand the gut brain axis and how much of our gut lining affects our nerve endings and our moods and the moods of our animals. We're just beginning to discover this. We're going to see so much more over the next 5 to 10 years about this. But there's enough evidence that clearly shows how much of an impact it has. And I'll just say, I appreciate your bringing up that you have goat milk in your products, because we use goat kefir, grass-fed goat kefir in our product specifically because it's one of the most amazing starter foods and helps get all that really great, good bacteria and probiotics in right away. So I'm a huge fan. Good goat milk and kefir and yogurt. 2 thumbs up.
So, Joel, what do you think about, because today's raw food manufacturers have been imposed upon in many ways to remove what is actually the microbiome from their products, because the authorities essentially want it to be sterile, so there's no chance of any possibility of pathogens being in there. What do you think of the idea of adding a product such as Gussie's gut over, say, your product, raw food? Would you approve of such a thing?
Absolutely. I was, from what I know and from what I've talked about Rob, I want everybody to be able to correct that gut flora in there. I think it's a great idea. And I still go back to kibble and using Rob's as a bridge even to start adding whole living food and then bring them into raw. Or if they're feeding half raw, half kibble, to then have that on there. Like, this is where I see it. I see that as a bridge product, which is so needed out there as well. Because even if we talk about diet, it's amazing how many people say, well, I did everything and still having some issues with yeasty ears. And then you find out, okay, that's great, but you're giving them pizza crust. You're taking that biscuit at the Starbucks drive-through. There's starch everywhere. It's not just diet. You got to factor in everything. So anytime we do things that add more life to their diet, go all in and do it, in my opinion. But I think that that's a good point, though, is, when you HPP, and there's always a threat of destruction, and every brand does it differently. So you could have a goal to make a sterile food. That's your goal. You could end up with that. Our goal was a little different. We want a whole living food. So we spent 2 years researching the process, testing it, experimenting, taking data, and making sure we use a very low pressure that just cracks that cell wall of the nasty pathogens, but keeps so much of the good bacteria. And we do have reports on that, but we need more. A product like Rob's to add to it is going to speed up some of that healing. And I'm very interested in, Rob, we were talking a little bit when we were chatting on the phone, was, it's not a single product. You have multiple functionality with it. And I'm wondering how some of that leads to healing the lining of the gut during the healing of the leaky gut process. There's a great function, and looking at this as some of these true healing products, pairing those with raw is brilliant.
That's the synergy, Joel. And in fact, when Rob approached me, it was this synergy that got me so excited. The fact that this was kind of the last link. I'd been talking about raw, obviously, since the early 90s, in fact, since the late 80s, with my clients, or mid 80s, actually. And the one thing that was eluding me was an easy way to get beneficial bacteria in, because we all know that dogs, being scavengers and coprophagic, actually require beneficial bacteria. They require bacteria in their gut. They actually even require things like salmonella and campylobacter. They have to be there. If they're not there, then the immune system doesn't learn to live in harmony with those bacteria. But that's another issue besides this one. We're not putting those into the product, of course. But the products I was asking people to make in my books did not really have everything that I would have liked them to have had in terms of beneficial bacteria. And when Rob told me about his concept of fermenting raw vegetables and then freeze drying them, I said, yep, that's it. That goes such a long way to completing the picture. And so that's one of the reasons I joined with Rob, why he was able to pull me out of retirement, as it were.
Pull you in here with us at 7 a.m.
And that as well. Yes, indeed.
You must like the product to come on here at 7 a.m. with great energy.
I'm very excited about the product because I think it does complete the picture. And we always knew the microbiome was important, but boy, are we learning more and more about it these days.
Absolutely. And the thing is, too, is keeping your product very user-friendly, very easy, very simple. And, you know, we know the importance of this to a different degree. We'll work harder to get good bacteria into our dogs and cats. But the general public hears it, but they're very busy in another world. They're not living it like we are. So it needs to be this nice, easy, quick delivery on the message, delivering on the actual how to use. All of that is going to be very important to keep it clean and simple because they're already bombarded with information. So you're going to want yours nice and strong and easy.
Yeah, and the simple message has always been for me, this is the food they were designed by evolution, nature, God, whatever you want to call it, to use. And why would you use anything else? It's just like your car. You use the manufacturer's recommended fuel, spare parts, and lubrication. And that is the very simple message. And to me, that's really as far as you have to go with most people. If they understand that, then they understand this is what they should be feeding. I've just got one other question. In
Sure.
your education of people, do you talk about the danger of sugar to the metabolism of our furry family members at all? In terms of high blood sugar, insulin, and all those problems, and inflammation and degeneration, etc.
We haven't gotten into sugar as specifically as we we go into highly processed starch. And so we're kind of there. So this is how our education works. And it is not a finished product. We think we're awesome at education today, but we want to say next year, wow, we know so much more and are doing so much more.
Yeah.
So every quarter we come out with new staff trainings for our retailers. We're about to launch a 30-minute one that's specifically on toxins and allergens. Toxins around the home, toxins in the yard, and allergens. We have one designed just for cats. We have a puppy, a senior. We have a gut health with leaky gut. And we're adding more and more. We haven't even gotten to dental. We haven't even gotten to, the list is so long.
The list is enormous, but well done, Joel. It's doing this. This is fabulous.
But we want to have more, because we're asked for more. So that's a great one to bring up that I'll pass on. And here's how we kind of do it. It's kind of fun. Somebody on our team is going to be very passionate about a specific topic, whether they're a cat person or they have a senior dog or whether they have a hunting dog with joint issues, whatever it is. And it's going to ignite a passion. And then that's the one we chase because in their voice, it's going to be hard not to. It's a very contagious voice when you believe with what you're saying and wanna get people there. So we use that as kind of our guide when we choose our topics.
That's brilliant. That's so wonderful. Yeah, the best salesperson is the person who actually believes in what they're talking about and has good reason to believe.
Absolutely. So I would like to share a cool story with you guys, just so you know. If you're ever in
Yeah.
Minnesota, about an hour north of where I am is the Wildlife Science Center. And the Wildlife Science Center is home to about 120 wolves. I think that's how many are there.
Wow.
So it's a wolf sanctuary. Peggy Callahan has run it for 35 years.
Wow.
And I actually taught her raw feeding quite a while, maybe 15, 20 years ago for her own dogs. And she's like, oh my gosh, I never put it together. Duh. So we laugh about that she has these wolves. When she took the sanctuary over from, it was actually run by the federal government, they use donated kibble to feed to the wolves. And so she has all this data from these wolves. Now, these wolves were living 12 to 13 years, about 120 pounds. She made one change to diet. She worked out a deal with a DNR. She gets all the roadkill deer surrounding her sanctuary. And so now she has new data, and 18 to 22 years, 135 pounds of lean muscle mass, no bloat, no such things as dental issues, hip and joint issues. They smell fragrant. That single thing, I mean, like there's the message, right? That is a
Right.
cooked diet to a whole food diet. And that change, I mean, wouldn't we love our large breed dogs to have that listed? 18 to 22 years, 135 pounds lean mass, no joint issues. I mean, that's what we're striving for, and there it is. And so it's a lot of fun when we collaborate with her. But that's what we're doing. We've gotten so far removed, and kibble's the new diet. That's now my whole life has been post kibble. So our normal is stacks of kibble, in a store or a feed store or something like that. But that's new,
It sure is. But people don't know that it's new.
Mhm.
They think that's the way dogs have always been fed, because they and the people that believe that the most, of course, the veterinary profession, sadly.
Mhm. Well, in the veterinary
Well,
profession, they're asked to do so much more than in the people world. They have to do surgeries. They have to do, in the people world, you have very specialized things. It's not quite the case in the veterinarian world. They're expected to do it all, be experts on all of it, and answer all of those questions. And then it's up to the heart and soul of the veterinarian on which parts they want to dive into and learn on their spare time and be passionate about. And diet tends to get, pushed aside. But there are more and more people like you, Ian. So, we're going to look on the bright side. But there's more and more
John,
like that.
one of the problems is the training of veterinarians, and they're trained by the pet food companies. We need companies like you to be stepping in and speaking. Here I'm putting the hard word on you now, to be speaking to the universities and saying we should have a role in training these people. And also, you're speaking about this wolf park. Has anybody published in any sort of peer reviewed journal the story of these wolves? Because that's so important.
Yeah.
That's awesome that you say that, because the answer is no. She's busy running a wolf sanctuary.
We have to put you in touch, Ian.
But yes, we need to do that.
Somebody should be doing this.
Mhm.
I mean, that sort of data, I think you say data in America, I don't know. That sort of data, that information is just pure gold. Absolutely. It needs to be put out there. When I was lecturing over many years ago in America, people would come up to me and say, look, I've been feeding not a very small percentage, and they'd be speaking about Great Danes, and they've been feeding raw for several generations. And these Great Danes were living up to 20 years of age. Great Danes that now live to 9 years and go.
Wow.
And they said that the only difference was they were feeding raw. And they would, they'd make that comment. And this was one of the things that continued. Well, I was already inspired, but it added to my inspiration that these people could tell me give me this information, tell me these stories. So what you're talking about with that wolf park is pure gold. It needs to be spread out there, and the world needs to know, because simply because.
And
Agreed.
tomorrow I'll be dropping off raw food at the wolf center because she's got some new wolf pups and she weans them onto Steve's before the roadkill deer. So we're the bridge food. So
Wow. That's
she was
incredible.
actually doing that for a number of years before I even knew it. She goes, "Oh yeah, we've been feeding Steve's." Like, you got to tell me this stuff, but an awesome place and just a wealth of knowledge. So it's out there. Like there's cool stuff out there and we need to bridge that education gap.
We
That's
sure
amazing.
do.
Well, gents, we have a little bit of time. Could we go into a couple questions?
Yep.
Ian, did you want to ask a question before we went into some questions?
No. I'm actually I'm blown away and really pleased by what I'm hearing from Joel about Steve's Real Food. That's absolutely wonderful. That's what we want. That's what I wanted when I first wrote Give Your Dog a Bone and thought, well, that'll be the end of it. I can now get back to doing what I want to do, which is just being a vet, but it never happened.
Agreed.
No, so if there's any questions, let's.
Yeah, great. Well,
Right.
well, one of our first questions is from Gail. Sorry, Gail. I think is did we say your name, Dimitrik? Sorry, that's my best chance, my best shot at it. But thank you for your question. Can you please tell me more about your thoughts on high histamines and fermented foods for dogs with allergies? Should I take a first stab at this?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think that it's a very individual and complicated topic when you get into animals that are there could be animals that are histamine intolerant. They have an intolerance to histamines. That's a whole other issue. And I'm sure you already know this, Gail, but I will just say for the audience that foods in and of themselves, like fermented foods, do not contain high histamines in and of themselves. It's actually created within the animal. So I would say that if you have an animal that is on the wrong diet, let's say, and not on a really wholesome, healthy, raw food diet, who is having tremendous histamine reactions, I would absolutely, you've got all the symptoms, the ears and the skin disorders and all that. I would absolutely talk to your vet and bring the vet our package or our printout of what's in our foods. We disclose everything. It's, we don't use a starter. That's not on our, the only starter we really use, like I said, is our goat kefir. And we use really high grade salt. We're happy to share with you details about that. Our a full detailed analysis on the salt we use. So you can bring that all into your vet and have your vet advise you if your dog has this issue. But and there's this other thing called the monoamine oxidase system that wipes away histamines from most animals. They never even have an issue. So this gets a little complex and it's not exactly great entertaining conversation, but it's a really good question. And it's something that I think if you've got an animal that's in a serious disease state, you should talk to your vet about that. How about you, Ian? What do you think about that?
Well, my immediate reaction is, what are you feeding this dog that's having these histamine reactions? Are you feeding a raw whole food diet, or are you feeding some kibble product, some dry food? And as a veterinarian, that would be the first part of my conversation. And the vast majority of dogs that you get off the kibble cease to have this problem. So you need to start them, if you're feeding kibble, on a raw food diet to start with, and then definitely quietly introduce something like Gussie's Gut as an addition. And I think you'll find that the problem will disappear, and it largely does in my experience, because this is just one of many, many problems that is brought about by the wrong diet. And the wrong diet produces, of course, the wrong sort of gut microbiome, and all the wrong things then start to happen. And so it's actually very simple. And this blew me away right from the word go. I could become a very lazy vet simply by changing the diet instead of doing a lot of diagnoses and fiddling around with all sorts of drugs. All I had to do was change to a simple raw food diet, and most problems disappeared, including this one. So that's my very simple answer. That's where I begin, and that probably most of the time that's where we end.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, we have this other quick comment. We've got a lot of really good comments, by the way. I'm sorry, Joel, I'm not putting these up that or how much that people love Steve's, but like this one right here from Two Clumbers and a Bulldog, cute account name. It says raw food of any description causes runs in my girl, but cooked food suits her better. She's almost 9. So it's the similar thing where, it's not necessarily the raw food, it's whatever is going on in the dog or cat or animal that is causing the runs. So it's I think people like to find a very simple solution to what can be a complicated problem. And some people just don't have the resources in terms of the right vets to give them the right guidance. And so it's better that they just eliminate something from their diet, because to them, that just makes a lot more sense. I mean, Ian, you see this all the time, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the simplest things to do, in my experience, is to simply take them off everything and just start to feed them on something as simple as ground up chicken wings. That's it. And see if that doesn't make a huge difference, because in most dogs it will. And then you've gradually add in other things over time as components of the evolutionary diet, and see if there's any component that actually causes this problem. But for the most part, unless they were actually allergic to chicken itself, and often this is just an allergy to some component of the raw food, if they weren't allergic to chicken, that will often fix it. They tighten up immediately. They produce those beautiful hard stools that go white in the sun. And then you can gradually add in other things. And of course, you're not going to do any harm in the short term, a week, feeding what people regard as an unbalanced diet. But that's not an issue I'm going to get into here, because that's a whole other question about what is actually in a raw meaty bone. But there is a way to go about this, and it's basically an elimination diet. And you start off with one thing, and that's the one I recommend if they're not actually allergic to chicken. And most dogs, what you find out is they're not actually allergic to raw chicken. It's very rare that they are. But anyway, that's a whole discussion between a knowledgeable raw feeding vet and the client, and really looking at the dog in question.
Great. All right. So let's go into another question. It's about actually Steve's. Robert, thank you for your question. And by the way, Gail, thank you for your question. Robert J. Henry says, omega-3 degradation in open bags of Steve's freeze-dried. Should it be refrigerated?
You can refrigerate it, but I actually keep it in more like a cool place. We put ours in a drawer at our house. We also make sure that we have the appropriate size. So we have a Doberman named Bimmy, in addition to Queen Freya the cat. We actually use our freeze-dried cat food as treats because the bags are much smaller. So we go through it much quicker than if we used our freeze-dried diet. So speed also matters in that regard. But anytime, this is that challenge. There is no perfect food, because our raw food has been processed, albeit lightly, freeze-dried, super convenient, but you run the risk of sunlight hitting the bag, opening it. There's no preservatives in there. And what you get at the start of the bag is never as good at the bottom. So you got to be really smart about the speed you're using it and things like that. I would always recommend, if you're using a freeze-dried product, add goat milk or our goat milk yogurt, our Chia Freeze goat milk yogurt. Add a little more life to it, especially if you're reconstituting it. If you put that in there to reconstitute it, you're going a long ways to complete health. I think that would offset any issues with opening the bag and degradation. So,
Great.
in fact, going back to the bulldog person earlier, even without if they're set and have gone through this enough where, raw is out now, we're going to do a gently cooked, and gently cook it. Okay. How do we add some life back in there? Freeze-dried is a great way to do it. Goat milk yogurt is a great way to do it. Do that in addition to that cooked, because if we put food on a ladder, that person, just by gently cooking it, is still in that top third of a ladder, with some pretty bad kibbles on the floor. Move up a couple rungs. just add some life in other ways. And sometimes some goes a long ways. I'm also not surprised it's a bulldog, because bulldogs, boxers, and Boston Terriers tend to have pretty fitsy stomachs for sure. Their gas is legendary. And, but also, how quickly did you transition onto those raw foods going with a bulldog? You take some dogs, you can go rather quickly. Some dogs takes quite a while. One thing that's going on that is so awesome in the pet world right now, but it does create a few more health issues that we're dealing with, is we keep them all. What I mean by that is less and less puppies are purchased through retail stores. We're bringing in rescue dogs. Our dog Bimmy came as a rescue dog. She was a stray. We don't know her history. We don't know. You might get a puppy from a rescue, but what if they didn't know mom was pregnant and shot her up with all these shots? Now you got immune suppressed puppies. We bring them home not because they're the strongest. We bring them home because we connect with them. And so we're bringing some health issues into our house, and we're not always knowing it. So just remember this. The goal is always to make your dog the best version of themselves. Now, that might not be perfect. You will get a problem child in the group, but that is really the goal. So think of just walk them up one more step of better health. That lets the pressure off of trying to be perfect right out of the gate. Just walk them up a step, then do one more good step. And there's another trap that we got to warn everybody about. As you learn more and more about good feeding, and as you see good results, it is very possible you're going to feel regret for past animals that you didn't know this knowledge on. And I could tell you this without even meeting any one of you. If they could say one thing to you, they would say, thank you so much for being awesome to me. Do not have regret for that. We're all learning every year better than the year before.
It's so true. It's so true. Let's go into a question from William. So William Seal, thank you for your question. William says, what do I do if I think my dog has yeast overgrowth, and what does it look like?
So yeast overgrowth comes in the form of my dog is allergic to everything, could come up when they go into the store. Itchy ears, smelly ears, constant scratching, smell in the feet, redness in the groin area, a lot of allergy symptoms, and that's yeast overgrowth. Yeast overgrowth, when you say what is the most common health issue out there today, most people do expect allergies because that's the symptoms that are everywhere. It's actually yeast overgrowth. And that's that gut imbalance between good and bad bacteria. So if you have, Bichons, Lhasa Apso, Shih Tzus, they're magnets for ear infections. That's a pretty obvious sign of yeast overgrowth. But really, it starts to come in this inflammation and itching and smelly feet and just these things, redness in the groin. And the nice thing is that you can correct it with food. I mean, that's how much control we have over this. It feels out of control. And when your dog has this, it's a quality of life issue. They need comfort, yet you're pushing them away because their ears smell. And it's a quality of life thing. Every day that they feel better, their life improves. And so yeast overgrowth is one that can be addressed pretty quickly. And it starts with this: pull out all the starch. Don't let them lick the ice cream dish. Don't let them have your extra pasta. Don't accept the biscuit at the bank drive-through. Get rid of any starch, meat-based treats only.
Yep.
Put them on a complete raw diet. And if you want, you can add goat milk, things like that, to really correct that gut imbalance. And it's not a long process, to reverse yeast overgrowth. It really isn't. That's one that there's not too many absolutes when it comes to diet because of so many variables. There's a high success rate on yeast overgrowth when it comes to raw pet food, correcting it and just righting that gut imbalance. And so many other things start to happen too. That's the best part.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, the way that I met Ian was 23 years ago. My first black lab, whose name was Buddy, literally brought him home. And he'd take 5 steps and he'd itch incessantly. take another 5. I mean, it was really almost unbelievable. And I was his first time. That was my first dog as an adult. And I was just like, what is going on? I went through 4 vets, and the 4th vet literally told me he'd have to be on steroids the rest of his life. Well, I didn't know very much at that time, but I knew that wasn't the answer. And so I, luckily the internet was just about, getting real popular. We had the Yahoo search engine, not Google yet, but about 23 years ago, that's how I found Ian. And I used the old-fashioned phone, and we did a phone consult, and he taught me everything I knew about raw food. Well, it was 4 weeks after I got rid of all of his kibble, and he never got snacks, anything, no table scraps, nothing. It was just the raw diet. It was 4 weeks, and it transformed this dog. It was miraculous. And so, I have seen it. It is a miracle when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Just the diet. So
that's
thank you,
right.
Robert,
This is where I began. This is where I began with so many dogs. We lived on the east coast, where I'm living now, actually, on the east coast of Australia, hot and humid, and but even in winter it was happening. And all these dogs were on these terrible kibble diets. Got them off that, and the problem disappeared. And along with so many others, this is what blew me away from the word go. We only had to change the diet, get them off the starchy foods, get them onto real food, and most of these problems disappeared. Some, of course, occasionally, and we always check them for flea bite allergy and also for demodectic mange. They were the other components that we had back then, and probably still do. But even then, just changing the diet made them less attractive to fleas, and their immune system made them more able to deal with things like demodectic mange and sarcoptic mange, and so it went on. But this was so blew me away that I had to write about it. Hence, Give Your Dog a Bone as the beginning of all this this belief in raw food, and it's continued to this day, and it's wonderful. And I'll say it again, to see companies like Steve's Real Food absolutely blowing it out of the park now with education and knowledge and products that are doing this job beautifully. Wonderful.
Thank you for all of that. Appreciate it.
Well, it's we're coming up on our hour, so thank you so much. Hey, Joel, do you want to tell anybody, besides we have your website up, stevesrealfood.com, is there anything else that you want to draw people's attention to on your website?
If you can head to our Facebook page, that's where we have list of our upcoming webinars. And so we got one coming up next or later this week, later in the month. We got an allergy one. We got one called The Power of Living Food, where I talk all about adding whole living food to diet, what that'll do for your dog and cat. And that's what we want to do. So check out our webinars. We do them in the evenings. They're free. They're all to just educate. And so come on up. We'd love to see you all there. That's probably the biggest call out we can do, because that drives us right to education. And that's what we want.
That's right. I mean, that's what it drew me to you guys. Your commitment to education is the same as ours. I mean, it's, and I think you and I share this attitude of, the rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
And ultimately the dogs are the ones that benefit. It's just, we're doing it, without and this consideration of, getting some business from it. It's about educating people and getting them to understand more about what their dogs need, and the dogs are the ones benefiting, which is great.
Awesome.
If our dogs benefit, then we benefit, of course.
Well, we do. Yeah, we do. I mean, my diet improved after I taught my first dog. I mean, it really did. It really, really did. I mean, I was pretty healthy, but I learned all about homeopathic and holistic medicine and all sorts of other modalities, all through, this amazing dog named Buddy back in the day. And and then my dog now, Gussie, who's 5, they just keep teaching you. It's just amazing how you can keep learning from them.
Gussie started the company. That's pretty impressive.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Well,
yes.
And you've got some samples of Gussie's gut, if anybody wants that, correct?
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Ian. Yeah. You can get a free sample at gussysgut.com. We're happy to send it off to you. And Joel, thank you so much
Oh,
for
thank you.
your time today. This is so interesting and so informative.
Thank you to
It
both
was
of you.
great to meet with you, Joel.
It was great.
All right. Well, we'll be talking to you. Thanks, everybody. If you're watching this, you want to learn more about the upcoming episodes we have, just go to the link that's on the bottom of our page and in our posts. It's gussysgut.com/live. And we'll let you know about future episodes that come up just like this great episode. Thanks, Joel. Have a great day.
You got it. Thank you.
Take care.